Ready's over.
Howdy, everybody.
Hey.
Welcome to the Stream Team Beekeeping Chat tonight. And for some reason, my mic I can't get it to work. So it's going to just be through the computer tonight. So hopefully that's okay. But good to see you guys again. I guess it's been cold up there in the north, hasn't it? Yeah, still down here.
I didn't know if Brian wanted to take it away with that. You got snow.
I think we were 70.
There you go.
70s today. I caught a couple swarms. So
there we go. That
catching
was today.
Swarms.
Yep. That's right.
Oh gosh, we don't have snow, but it has been pretty cold. The bees haven't been flying a whole lot.
Yeah.
So we'd like to welcome everybody on tonight. We have a special guest, but I guess before we really get into this thing, we'll kind of go around the horn a little bit. Greg, what's going on in your neck of the woods?
No snow, but we're not in the beekeeping season quite yet. Still cold. Bees aren't doing really hardly anything. We had a little warm snap, a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. Everyone got excited. Then it got cold and then rainy and sleet and all that kind of stuff. And the bees are just kind of just slowly doing their thing. The maples have been really slow to actually bloom. We had about one warm day and the south side of the trees started to open up. But the forsythia has bloomed. So for all you folklore and old timers, we've got 3 snows after the forsythia blooms is what we used to say in Ohio. It's at least going to be 2. So I don't know. We'll see how wild this year is going to get. But we got 70s, 60s and 70s coming up here. And then back into the 30s. We still got this roller coaster scenario going on. We'll maybe talk more about that this week or next. But when to feed, how to feed, more importantly, why to feed. That's kind of what a lot of folks are talking about right now. But it's not quite go time, but it's not quite not. We're somewhere in between to where we've said it a million times. God's given us a great, beautiful indicator, which is the color yellow. When we see forsythia at the beginning of the year, it's time to get all your preps in place, get everything ready to go. When we see yellow at the end of the year, like goldenrod, time to wind it down, get everything buttoned up. So we're in that season of let's get everything squared away. Let's get everything staged. Let's get everything prepped. because I've got a feeling when the season finally hits this year, we're all going to be anxious to get going. So are the bees.
Absolutely. Brian, how about you, man?
Well, we had snow today, so not doing much. I got messages from 2 different people today about swarms, and my response to each person, I sent a picture of the snow. The one guy said, "Was that today?" I said, "Yeah, right now." He said, "That's ridiculous." I said, "Welcome to Ohio." So it's like Greg said, we're getting close. Now I did look, there's a forsythia right out in the front of my mom's place, and every time I go over, I slow up and I kind of look at it just to see what it's doing. There's nothing close on it yet, so but we're usually a week or 2 behind Greg. So where we're at here, because it's 2 hours, it's in that probably around 2-week range. In our forecast coming up, like right now today, we had snow. Tonight, I think we're going to get down to 25. So it's just, winter does not want to let up. It's going to warm up. This weekend, we're going to have 70. We've got thunderstorms, though, coming. And usually that happens when we do get those like really warm days this early in the year. It just, Mother Nature just lets loose. Now we do have April Fool's Day is coming up. It's my brother's birthday, by the way. But April Fool's Day, it's going to get down to like 29. So I'm like, are you kidding me? It's going to be 29 degrees in April. So, but it is what it is. I mean, this is usually what we have as far as winters here. Last year, when, it was second week of April, I had my first swarm. That was very, very unusual. So this year is more into the norm. So we'll probably hit our swarm season May. We'll be second, third week of May probably. So, but it's okay. I peeked real quick at my colonies when I was over yesterday, and I popped the little the plug that's on the top of the lids. And one girl didn't like that. She came up and I had to do the old, I look like Rocky trying to bob and weave because she didn't like me so much doing that. But those 3 still look good. So a lot of activity there. So, we'll get there. We'll get there our seasonal start. So
Sounds good. Down here, I think we were upper 70s, low 80s today. And right now it's 72. Beautiful day. Just to rub it in a little bit.
Just why don't you?
I stacked honey boxes on a little bit. I put a honey box on a lot of the colonies last weekend, and it's been game on here for a month or 2 now. So
Unbelievable.
Hey.
We'll just rub it in, Bruce.
Emily,
no comment.
We're going to add you to our group text, Emily, because Bruce has a habit every single winter. Greg and I will get pictures of him in flip-flops with these like sunsets when we look outside and there's like a foot of snow.
Oh.
We have more pictures of his feet with these sunsets than any human.
He likes to rub it in,
have.
you could say.
Yeah.
Hey, I hear you can make some good money with that, though.
Yeah.
That's true.
Well, I mean, you guys can all move down south. I mean, that's the other option, but I know you like where you live. So anyway, but yeah, today I was at work right at the end of lunchtime, and I was about to get ready to go do my afternoon, and somebody, I work at a big hospital with some external clinics, and so one of the external clinics, a guy called from over there, and my boss, because I guess they knew I had bees or whatever, and sent him a picture of a swarm right over there. It was not too far from the clinic, and so they asked if I wanted to go get it, and it ended up being 2 swarms. I actually talked to the guy, and he had seen another swarm about 10 or 15 feet away. And the first one I got, the original one, was pretty good size, probably between a volleyball and basketball size, really nice swarm. The other one was pretty small, but I said, well, can I do it on the clock? Because it was a medical center external clinic, and they're like, yep. So I just hopped on in my truck. I happened to have a couple of nukes in there. Each of them had a frame of a foundation in there, or just a frame. I didn't have any other drawn comb or anything, but I went over there. It was kind of across town. It's actually not far from my house here, and just caught a couple of swarms. And at the end of it, a couple of the staff there, a couple of the girls that worked there wanted to come out and see the bee. And so I got a picture of them, like one of them's holding the box up and the other one was kind of like this. Kind of funny how they came in there. But anyway, but it was fun. It was successful as far as I know. And then on the way home, I put them out there in the Midland City Bee Yard, and we'll just see if they make it or not. If they leave, it's but I got a couple hours out of it, and so it worked out fine. And went back and just checked on one more patient was all I had to do. I didn't have to do an entire afternoon, so it worked out okay. But
nice.
But we're really we're rocking on right now. This past weekend, a couple of weekends ago, I went out and I was concerned because there were so many bees in the inside the hives that I was just worried that they were going to start swarming. I actually saw a couple of swarms, and I caught one and saw two that were too high to catch. And so I'm like, man, I'm in trouble. So I've been like last week, I was chomping at the bit all week to get out there and put some, just give them a little space and check on them. So I did. I put honey sleepers on some of them. A friend of mine had some queen cells. Tyler Walker down there, he's got really good bees. And so Greg mentioned, replacing old queens. If you just sometimes put a queen cell in there, didn't really need to do a lot of splits, but I did. I just, if I popped open a lid and saw a colony that I wasn't happy with, I just dropped a queen cell in there, and if it works and the queen kills the old queen and gets mated, that's great. If not, there's still a hive there, so a colony of bees there. So I thought it'd work out okay. And I also shut down the Ozark Bee Yard. I moved the 4 colonies that were surviving up there down to a different place, and so I don't have to drive up there anymore. But that's kind of what I did on Saturday. It was an all-day affair. But I'm really excited, guys. I mean, my college basketball team is doing as good as they ever have, just about, and I've got the shirt on here. BYU Cougars. They're playing Alabama of all teams. So my favorite 2 teams are playing tomorrow night at 6:09 Central Time. So I'm pretty
6:09.
6:09.
What? I mean, how does that work?
I'm sure it has
everything down south, Greg.
It'd be 7:09.
Reason.
Now, are you Eastern Time or Central Time, Emily? What are you?
Eastern.
Okay, so you guys, it's all going to be 7:09.
She's on the right time too.
Yeah, the late time.
Right time.
Anyway, so that's what's going on here. I did shoot some footage. It was just kind of a all over the place type of a day, and so yeah, Central Time Zone isn't real. Well, it's real to me. It's real
Fake
to me.
news.
But anyway, so I wanted to introduce our guest tonight. Many of you probably know Emily from Beekeeping, Emily Pedzinski, and I met you in person at the Bee Expo, Emily, and you've been doing some really good work. I know. Kind of found out about you about probably 3 years ago. You were kind of just getting started with your bees and with your channel, getting real serious about it. And so I know you've learned a lot of lessons. You've tried a lot of things and done a lot of things. And the thing I like about your channel, one thing is that you show it all, and then you just give it a shot. And I think that a lot of people could learn a lot from watching. And so, but I've been able to sit back and kind of watch you develop. As a beekeeper, I think we all have, and you and Casey are kind of taking it big time. I've been seeing you posting about all the equipment you've been buying, like thousands of frames and hundreds, if not thousands of boxes, and just a lot of stuff going on. So you guys have got big plans. You've traveled out west. You've visited with Randy Oliver. You've been all over the place, and you really do a great job with your channel, and the editing is just second to none. And so I'll give you just a second to kind of introduce yourself and just kind of talk about your experience in beekeeping, kind of what you've been through the last few years, and just tell us a little bit about yourself and what's going on up there in Michigan.
Gosh, I don't know how to beat that intro. Thank you. I appreciate that. So yep, I run BeFit Beekeeping, the YouTube channel. Started beekeeping about 6 years ago. Kind of just fell into it. I've noticed that most people, they do research before starting beekeeping, but I just kind of dived in head first. One of my friend's parents had some old beehives that he needed filled and was just like, hey, you can have them if you want to put bees in them. So I looked up how to get bees shipped to your door, threw them in there, didn't check on them for a couple months. Then he called me up and was like, hey, you should probably do something with them because they're bearding on the outside. He didn't know what it was called at the time. So he just said there was a bunch of bees on the outside and they're going to swarm if you don't do something about it now. So I looked up how to do a walkaway split. And that was the day that I decided I should probably actually take this seriously, because I went out there with a cheap bee suit off of Amazon. It was a suit that the bees can sting through because they were like that thin cotton material. And I tried lifting the top box and it was so heavy I couldn't pick it up. And I had to carry it like 10 feet over that way to get it on the new stand. Well, I backed up to let them just kind of calm down because they're getting all feisty. And that's when I got stung in the eye, got stung through the suit a million times. They got more and more mad after that. So I decided, okay, I need to actually look into this, do some research, and try to learn everything I can about bees. I'm actually going to be a beekeeper. But since then, I grew from 7 hives, well, from 2 hives to 7 hives to then like 20 something, to now running about 200. And we're aiming to be able to send 59 pallets, so 236 hives to almonds. That's the big goal for this year.
Wow.
We can get them all deeps, heavy, and ready to go by about December when we usually send them. So, yeah.
Wow.
Awesome. Well, tell us kind of, I know that, a couple of years ago, we kind of watched and you did some split slating, you did some different things. What have you learned? I guess there are a lot of people probably watching the chat tonight that maybe in the stages that you were just even 3 or 4 years ago, where you just had a few colonies. And so what kind of advice would you give them as far as caring for their bees? I know that, there are a lot of people out there that are all about the treatment-free beekeeping. There are a lot of people that, and of course I tried that for a while and found that I lost a lot of bees. And so what, Brian?
You need to dial that in, buddy.
Dial it in, Bruce. Come on.
You need to just simmer down with this talk that you're starting here. You're getting a little squirrely.
You're saying the TF words, you're gonna get flagged on YouTube, and it's just gonna be. Come on now, Bruce.
What I've learned was it didn't work for me very well. So now I kind of do whatever I need to do to try to treat my bees in the best possible way. So what kinds of things I've noticed that since I guess you and Casey have you guys do have a bee yard where you do some experimental stuff, right? And you just but you also, you're not opposed to treating and feeding and things like that. That's really kind of where I think the growth has been for you lately. So, thoughts? What do you think?
I would definitely say patience is key. And that's something that kind of took me a couple years to finally understand, because in the beginning, so when I did those splits I did a few years ago, I did them in August, and I'm located in Michigan. So doing splits in August is a really bad idea because they're not going to be built up in time for winter. But at the time I was like, hey, I had just seen a video from Mike Palmer about his double, what are they called? Like the nukes that he does with the dividing board down the middle. And I was so inspired by it. I was like, hey, I'm going to do it right now. I'm not going to plan this out. I'm doing it right now. Well, I definitely paid for it, but I learned a lot about the bees themselves. So my biggest tidbit of advice would be just to try things. I mean, even if you lose your bees, you can always get more. And as long as you have the comb, then they will build up so fast as soon as you put bees in there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Brian, Greg, thoughts?
I'm here for the ride.
Why should do the talking? Let Brian take over there.
Yeah. No, I mean that's all. That's good advice for people, because when I was on, I did a chat with Grayson on Monday, and he said, "What's a lesson learned?" And I did some similar things, Emily. When I got my very first colony, it was a package and got it through the winter. And I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have any books. I was flying by the seat of my pants. It's beekeeping, So it got that time where the colony is all built up, and I didn't want them to swarm. So when I opened up the colony and I'm doing an inspection, I was finding all of these capped cells. Didn't look for a queen. I just thought, I'm going to stop them. And I remember telling my mom, I'm like, they're going to kill the queen. I got to kill them. And I was literally going through and I was cutting them off, and I was all proud. I was holding them in my gloves, smashing them. And I'm like, you are not going to kill my queen. And my mom's like, did you get them all? I'm like, I don't know. And she's like, did you find your queen? I'm like, no. So I was just going through, just annihilating everything, you know, lesson learned. So,
Yeah, I've been there before too.
Yep.
Was scratching my head. Why don't I have a queen all of a sudden? What happened to her?
Yep. Lesson learned. So
Emily, I think the last time I can remember that we had John, I think at least maybe one of the times it was on Bruce's channel. And I think you were kind of really trying to dial in your treatment approach there. And I can remember, kind of picking up the fact that you were maybe you're thinking about heading towards either a treatment free or less of a treatment or whatever made sense to you. But it seems as though we all have ideals, and then we have ideas, and then some of us, yourself included, you get the feedback from the bees or the actual context when it's realized in the scale that maybe sometimes the ideals that we have and the ideas don't necessarily line up with the actual reality. Can you talk to us a little bit about the critical thinking process, how you have ideas or ideals, how you apply that, and then is how your learning process and your feedback loop, is that different now than what it was maybe a couple years ago?
Oh, much different. So when I first started, I'm kind of like a all or nothing kind of person. So when I first started, I went the approach of everything's going to be treatment free, just the whole entire apiary, and whatever makes it, makes it. Well, I learned pretty quickly that when you do that, you lose a lot of hives. And if you're trying to grow your operation, then it's not necessarily sustainable. So now going forward, whenever I do experiments, also kind of depending what it is, but I try to just isolate it to just a couple yards, and then of course have like a control group in that same yard, because that's also important just to see what's going on, because in each yard you're going to have different floral sources and different microclimates with the weather and stuff like that that are going to affect things.
Yeah, what's one? Go ahead, Bruce.
No, you go ahead, Greg.
Are we going to rock, paper, scissors this, Bruce? Come on.
Go ahead.
No, I was just thinking, Emily, as you kind of look back, that's I mean, it's really good advice. A lot of folks, I don't know what it is. I think if we go into any, like, I think a lot of what we do, for some folks it's a hobby, for some folks it's a career, from some folks it's it's a side hustle. It's all different, and that's okay. But it seems like when you get into the homestead realm of things, a lot of folks, myself, I'm talking about myself. It's just it's all or nothing. We're all in, and then a lot of times we think that we can take the information that's in front of us and somehow manipulate that in a way to where it's more of us in it, and somehow it's going to be better, or somehow we're going to be the exception, not the rule. What advice would you have for folks, Emily, as they're trying to sort out their path? What advice would you have for folks as they are trying to understand what it is that they're seeing and make decisions based on that?
I mean, kind of like what I said. So when you try something new, I always recommend for new beekeepers to always start off with 2 hives at least, not just start with 1, because then you can try something in one hive and then see how it goes compared to the other one. You have that control. But to honestly, I think the easiest way to learn is to make the mistakes and try new things. And beekeeping teaches you a lot about yourself too. I mean, I think you touched on that really well, that over time you kind of start to learn that, okay, if one of my personality traits is to always go all in on it and then say everything then collapses, now you're in a tough spot. So it just kind of helps you develop your character a little bit more too. I feel like I'm kind of like bouncing all over the place with this, but honestly, just kind of go along on the journey. I think beekeeping has a really good way of taking you along on every single part of the experience.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I've been one that over the years has tried, if you've watched the channel, if anybody has, I've tried about everything. I'm kind of an all-in guy too. And what I've learned is that honestly, there are many different ways to do it. Everybody has their own customized way of doing things. Even if you are in whichever camp you're in, whatever your goals are, if you and I have the exact same goals, we're going to go about it a little bit differently. That's just how life is. But in the bees, I think you do have to try things. And obviously the people that have been the commercial guys, the people that have been sideliners or even hobbyists that have done it for years kind of have things that they found work for them. And they just kind of stick to those principles, maybe try new things every once in a while. But I know many commercial beekeepers just kind of have a strategy that's worked over and over for them for their goals. And they just continue to just duplicate that. They get really good at it. And so that, whatever they do for feeding, treatments, for splits, if they want to if their focus is sending bees out for pollination or making bees, they get really good at that. And because it's their livelihood and that's what they do. But I think as we grow from starting with as a hobbyist and then grow it into even like a sideliner, there's a little more room, at least in my case, there was to try different things. What I found in my situation though, is as I do that, I'm very inefficient. You know what I mean? If I've gotten to the point now to where I want to be super efficient with everything. And so I've tried a lot of things and I've thought it's been fun to do a lot of things and I'll probably try some more things, but really what I've kind of dropped back into is the basics that my initial mentor taught me. He told me this probably within, if not the first day, within the first short little while. He said, mites and beetles, you have to control the mites and beetles. And I didn't even know what they were at first. I had no idea what that meant. And then about a year into it, when I overwintered all 6 of my hives that I had, I bought 4 and then I had 2 splits that first year. I thought I've got this thing figured out. So then I decided not to, not to do anything about it. I kind of played around with treating a little bit, but I didn't really take it serious at all. And I found that I was losing bees and I was losing, I had no clue what I was doing. And so I went on that journey for a few years. And then I've kind of moved back into the other camp. And what I'm just trying to do is I just want to be a good steward of the bees, whatever that takes. I don't have the time to really develop a line or really focus on just going all in on the treatment free stuff. And I do what I can. Obviously, as time goes on, if I can get my genetics honed in a little bit, if I can get the attitude like I want it and they're still productive, and then maybe in the future I can work towards that, just grafting off of the best, kind of like what Greg's done up there in Ohio. Greg he's been working on that for years. And Greg, I know you've been having some success seeing your bees, just they're what they have the traits that you like. And you're moving, and now I know you're grafting for the best of the best, but I'm not at that point yet. I'm just trying to get the best. I'm trying to get the genetics how I want them so I can start doing more of that. But anyway, that's I think it's just a journey for all of us. That it sounds a little sappy, but it's just true. I mean, it's like we all just have to just go on that journey. And what I really do not like at all is people that are like, you have to do it this way, you have to do it that way, or this way doesn't ever. I'm like, there are things that might work perfectly well for me here in Alabama. For example, I did splits in February. Well, that wouldn't work for you guys up there. And you can't tell me it doesn't work here because I've done it, and I can't tell you, so it's just, people just need to, I think there's a lack of respect by a lot of people out there for all of us. And one thing about having a YouTube channel and sharing what we're doing is that you get, we get criticized sometimes, and some of the things I've done have been quite boneheaded and I deserved it, but I did show what doesn't work. And so maybe it helps somebody out. I don't know. But anyway, Greg, as far as your situation, I know we've all taken that journey, but kind of maybe, I don't know if Emily knows your story as far as kind of how you got to where you're at now with the genetic line that you've had and kind of how you've kind of come to where you're at. Could you maybe talk to her a little bit and kind of share
we've almost had the time to have this conversation in person twice. We saw Emily and Casey in Louisville, and then it was cool. We got to see him again up in Wisconsin. But we always say, with all your mutual friends or collaborators or folks that you say, hey, are you going there? Hey, let's hook up, let's talk. I mean, there's never enough time at the conferences. No matter what you do, there is just never enough time. You're in the moment. And then if you're a knucklehead like all of us on the screen are, and you're carrying a camera with you, you're always squirrel dogging to whatever the thing to capture is in the moment. Sometimes you have no idea what that is. But yeah, so sorry, Emily, Casey, and yourself, and we didn't get a chance to talk or kind of share any of that. But it's I think our story is no different than Emily's or anybody else. You start off with a set of ideals, and you say, this is how we're going to do this thing without having any experience. And then you have all these ideas, and that says, okay, I'm going to go about it this way. And then you head down that road, and then all of a sudden you start getting feedback immediately. And then we all go through this phase where when those initial feedback is coming in, you're resisting what it is that you're actually seeing because it doesn't line up with your ideals and it doesn't match the ideas that you have. And you keep digging in and you keep pushing and you keep pushing and you keep pushing. And then eventually, a lot of us, we hit the brick wall and we can no longer kick this ideal can down the curb any further. And you say, okay, no matter what we do, no matter how many years we try to breed this magical, invincible bee, it's not happening and it's not working. So what are we going to do? Well, it's like, I love the bees. I love every aspect of it, except for the fact that they're dying. And so what can I do to change this? And all of a sudden you have to have some introspect, and you look inside and you say, okay, well, hey, maybe I was wrong. Maybe this wasn't the best idea. How do we go about and move forward with that? And I think, Emily, what's interesting to think about is, all of us, including Bruce, are too young in our beekeeping journeys to have experienced the original plague of trach mites and then varroa mites and then whatever, all these different cycles. Some of the old timers have, and they have, through experience, through wisdom, have built a mindset that when they do something, there's feedback, they learn from it, and they move quickly. Emily, how has your experience with, it doesn't matter if treatment-free versus treating, feeding versus not, all those things, how do you think that that's going to play into the current situation that we see right now, where bees are dying? We're trying to figure out what that is. Do you think that you're more, you have a greater ability to sort through the situation in real time now because of your past experience than trying to sort through the reality of maybe what you're seeing in Michigan or what you saw in California? Are you better equipped to sort through it because you've had some challenges in the past?
Oh, most definitely. Kind of going back to when I tried going treatment free. So we lost a lot of hives. I believe it was like we only had 20% survive the year that we went treatment free across the board. So out of that, though, I always scratched my head. Okay, why is it that the ones that did make it did end up making it, though? And I mean, just kinda, like, going through that and actually trying to pick apart, like, what makes the bees healthy, just beyond even mites, like, what in the bee helps them combat the mites, why like how I've talked about, like, with vitellogen sometimes, and, like, kinda tying into, like, the nutritional sources that they're getting too. um Sorry, I got off on a tangent. What was your can you re-say the question one more time? I was, like, talking about too
No,
many things.
that's what we do. And I was trying to put together a question, and let me put it a
Yeah.
different way. Is recent lately I've been thinking, man, if it wasn't for the fact that I had all of these seemingly negative outcomes, it wouldn't have put me into a position to be a much better critical thinker, to be able to look at
Mhm.
exactly what's in
Yeah.
front of me and sort through all the nonsense and sort past the ego and sort past the, well, I think it's this or I think it's that. Because we've had loss, it forces you to act quickly, to pivot quickly, to look at
Mhm.
the facts in
Mhm.
front of you and then make a decision. And my question to you was, because of your past experiences, do you think that that's going to help equip you to be able to sort through the current situation with the catastrophic bee loss that we're seeing coast to coast? Do you think your past experience is equipping you to maybe help sort through and know which stones to turn over and how to better evaluate what the information in front of you?
Oh, definitely. And I think too, you touched on so the part that you touched on with ego, I think in circumstances like this, we want to instantly attach blame to something right away.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's just whatever flag we're flying, that's what we're hopping on. So I think just all of the mistakes that I have made and all the different things I've tried and just being able to work through that, I think definitely did help me be able to look through some of the information that was coming in. Because I mean, we've heard so many different things. It could be the lack of nutrition, it could be the bird flu, which was a crazy one. It could be amatraz resistance, varroa mites. There's so many different things that could be affecting it. But I think to be able to step back and actually look at it without an ego, without any agenda, and just kind of pick apart, okay, what are the symptoms? What is happening? Where was it happening? How are the bees doing after the fact? Are they building up? Where can we go from here? And kind of just going from that aspect.
Yeah, I like that, because you don't ever want to, it's important because this is not the last time we're going to have some tough times as beekeepers, and
Yeah.
so it's been way too long since we've had to really dig in this deep to try to figure out what is going on. Hopefully we don't have to do that again. But I think the silver lining is, with this, a lot of us being young in this beekeeping journey, we're going to be the old timers in 20 years from now that are going to say, hey, remember back in here's how we sorted through this, and here's how we moved forward. You heard, with trach mites, how there was a certain protocol that was in place to help with that. With varroa mites, there was a certain protocol that started to become in place to help with that. Maybe we get past this, but to me, I'm always interested in the mindset and the learning part. Like, how quick can we move? How quick can we actually make some positive change? And that's great. It's great to get past the one thing, but is this going to better equip us in the future when the next thing happens? I think it will.
I've
Especially
said,
we can get some good research going too on some of the hives that did collapse and what was happening in those areas.
I've said in one of the talks, and I tell a lot of people this, kind of piggybacking off of what you said, Emily, it's when we do kind of experiment and you have failures, we're all going to have failures. It's human nature. We will fail at some point. Whatever hobby we get into, whatever it is, you will have failures. But it's how you react to that failure, how you look at that. And it's what I did when I had those moments where I had just severe losses, major losses. You step back and you look at everything and you're like, well, let's examine this. Let's assess this. And I think working in healthcare kind of programmed me that way too. But it's like, let's assess what happened. Look at what we can change. There are certain factors in beekeeping that I can control. So let's look at what I can do. And if I can do things better so that they survive, well, that's how you learn and that's how you grow,
Mhm.
and it defines you. It defines your character. If I were to just go in the other room and throw myself on the ground and kick my legs, nobody's going to like that. My wife will probably throw something at me and say, you idiot, look at you.
The dog will look at you a little funny too.
Exactly. Eli would probably look at me funny. But it's how you react to all of those situations. And that's what kind of defines your character, But, those beekeepers and each of us, none of us, I think, are ever going to quit here anytime soon. We're all going to have struggles and we're all going to get through those, and we'll move forward. And, each of us, I think, we're each fighters. We won't ever give up. I know Greg, years back, I know his story, the challenges that he had, and it took the boss though to say, hey, knucklehead,
Knock it off. Yeah, that's it.
You got to stop doing that, but and then he's where he's at now, and Bruce the same thing. Bruce has had challenges, but I mean, you look at where he's at now. So and I know when years back when I was watching your videos and watching your learning process, watching you grow, I can look back at some of your old videos, and I mean, I kind of laugh because I was right there though too. Some of my old videos, I just look right now and I'm just like, oh, should I just take those off of there? Because I look like a total fool. But that's how we grow, though. It's how we mature in our hobby, in our business, like you're going to turn it into,
And it humbles you very quickly too.
It does. It does. Yeah.
The greatest humbler we've ever known has been bees, and then beekeeping as a business. That's a whole other level of humbling. There's no room for ego there.
That's for
Oh,
sure.
yes.
Oh, yeah.
For those in the comments, I'm actually starring some of the questions. If you have questions for us, just put them in. It's easier to see them if they're in all caps. But I'm starring a few comments and questions here, so hang tight. We'll get to those after a while. But yeah, I totally agree with that. I personally have just the learning curve has been great. Now, part of it, I just wanted to try a lot of things just for fun. Things that they kind of made sense to me, so I would try them. I've tried all kinds of splits that are not efficient at all. I've tried all kinds of different things. I've tried all kinds of treatments, all kinds of feeding, not feeding. I haven't tried everything. I don't know if it's possible to try everything, but I've sent bees off to pollination. I've tried all kinds of stuff, but I've just kind of over time, I've kind of gotten weary of doing that and just trying everything there is to try. And I've tried to really kind of, I don't know where my queen right dial is, but it's normally around here. I would just say dial it in. I've been trying to.
It's with your microphone cable.
I don't know. My microphone cable is hooked up. I'm telling you, it's just not. I don't know why it's not working, but anyway, it's like my computer's not recognizing the mic for some reason. It's weird, but so it's just key that we, I can't emphasize enough, and we've talked about this over and over and over again, that we have to respect other people and what they do. We need to realize that none of us are going to do the same. And this community, everyone in the comments here, everyone in the chat is doing things differently. And so it's not my job to be critical of you or anybody else. It's not my job to do that. My job is to do the best I can for my bees in the way I see fit, and to hopefully help other people the best I can, and then to support those people who are out there trying to get it done. And, I see people, I know, let me see if I can find this comment here. And this is a guy that lives here locally, Eric from Spirit of Toad. He had a question here that he said, what % loss did you guys on the screen have this year? I assume that's talking about us. Well, I didn't count exactly, but probably around 20 to 30%. I didn't count exactly, something like that. But that's pretty typical for me. I've had years that were worse back when I didn't really, in the past, I've kind of tried, but I haven't had like a plan. Like I haven't really tested to see what the situation was with my bees. I haven't really had a good handle on what was going on. I've just kind of tried to throw everything at them or not and just kind of see what happens. But now I've got a much better strategy to kind of check for mites, treat, and check for everything and kind of treat the bees as I see fit. The bee inspector comes out and checks my bees. He was just out here last weekend. And so, a weekend before last. And so I'm kind of trying to get a handle on what's going on, but I had no clue at the beginning. None of us really did. And so, I just want to, I've seen people in the chats here saying that, well, I'm treatment free and I had 100% make it through winter. That's great. Keep doing that. I mean, if that's, that's great news, but there are also those people who try that and they lose almost all their bees. And so there has to be a plan and process. There has to be a process that you go through. It takes work to get to anything you want to accomplish. And if that's your direction you want to go, that's why you have your testing yard now, Emily, where you can try different things there. And then hopefully maybe in the future extrapolate on your bees, but you're not just going 100 all in with all your bees. You're trying to develop that there. I know you're looking at different things there. And so that's what we're all doing. I think, and Randy Oliver talked about the importance of a control group when you try new things. Don't try it on all of them. Have a group set aside and try, a control group to see, because if you throw a treatment at the bees and then they are exactly the same as the ones you didn't, then the treatment was ineffective. There's no reason to do it, if that makes sense. If you got see if you compare the two groups, if you feed one group and if you feed them all and they do great, well, you'll say, well, it's because of feeding. But what if a certain supplement, or what if you fed all of them except for a few, you had a control group and they all did the same, then, well, maybe the feeding, that particular type of feeding didn't help, or maybe that it was just a really good year and there was nectar coming in and they just did well regardless. And so it's important to kind of, if you want to really hone it in and dial it in, you need
That's a good one, Bruce.
Scientific approach.
You weren't even trying, Brian. That's just coming out natural now.
But my goal is to try to simplify, to try and do the best I can with my bees. And I'm working hard at it the best I can. And, with my schedule, I can't do everything I want to do, but I am getting better, I think, at being able to accomplish more things and more tasks with the bees, because I'm trying to be more efficient. So anyway, well, how about you guys? I know, I know, Eric, we've all, I don't know if we even want to really talk about our percent loss, but I was probably 20-30%, and it was no different. I have not had,
Let me see,
really a different year than usual. That we're a little bit behind on our, it seems like right here where I'm at, we're a little bit behind, but the bees have built up nicely and they're doing well. And I'm just waiting for the actual honey flow to kick in, or the nectar flow to kick in here, so we can actually start filling up supers. They've filled up their main boxes, but they haven't started really storing and capping a lot of honey yet. But that's coming here hopefully real soon.
63% was my loss.
Whew.
You must have done. You're pretty good at math. That's a.
It was actually 62.5, but I rounded up.
Rounded up, see, for the sake of. What's interesting about that is, as Emily, you said you have some control yards. What we've seen this year is have the loss that we're seeing is no respecter of genetic type. We've seen yards where we've got 3 different sets of genetics, where one may be heavy and Caucasian, one would have been Italian VSH, and then one would be a mutt between. We saw 100% loss in some yards with all 3 genetic lines in there. We've seen some yards where 1% survived. We've seen yards where 100% survived, and it is no respecter of genetic lines. So I don't think genetic lines have anything to do with the loss that we're seeing, and I'm not so sure treatment-free versus treatment has anything much to do with it. But in your neck of the woods, Emily, have you seen where, I'm trying to find a nice way to say this, because have you brought in, let's say, stock that was reported to do thus and such, and then you brought it into your yard and it didn't do that at all, and maybe things went sideways? Do you find that you see different varying results from genetic lines and those attributes based on maybe your location, your soil biome, your soil microbiology? Flora, fauna is different from maybe where a certain genetic seed came from?
Oh, definitely. So last year we decided to bring in some queens from down south, which I don't want to give down south a bad rep, because there's good queens all over the United States. And over the years, I've kind of started to learn that, yes, having queens from a northern climate is good, but I think you can also, bees adapt really quickly. So even bringing in genetics from other states also could potentially do well. I think the biggest factor, at least from what I've seen in the last couple years, is actually what's going on in the environment. Because so right now I have one yard I've talked about on the channel called the hunting yard. And I put bees out there last year. It was about May. And since then, they have just been doing absolutely terrible in that yard. Other yards, they're doing great. And when I did try out these queens, I did split them up amongst other yards, like how you talked about, and then also put them into this yard. But at first, I was like, okay, maybe these are just bad queens, and they're just not building up. They're not doing well. But those same queens in other yards, I just checked them today actually. They're looking wonderful.
Hmm.
So in this one specific yard that is doing so poorly, as I've watched it over the year, I just got some hives back from almonds about a couple days ago, and I put those hives out there. So all the hives, they generally look the same when they come back. They all have about like 8 to 10 frames of brood. They probably have like 8 extra pounds of bees you could just shake out of there, and they'd still look like a super big hive. And those hives that I put out there, now they've been out there actually for about 5 days now. Those hives in particular are going backwards. The queens have stopped laying, but then when I went to other yards, the queens are still laying, they're still building up, they're bringing in pollen. So I don't know, I think it's more than just genetics. I think it's what is in your actual specific area. And you would think too with this yard, so it's on a public hunting land that they try to bring in as many native plants and maintain native plants in the area and keep out anything invasive. And I don't know if it's just they don't provide enough nectar or pollen for the bees, but I'm probably going to end up pulling everything out of that yard and moving them somewhere else because I'm just tired of seeing bad bees in that yard.
That's a really great comparison, because there are folks all over the country that say, I've got treatment-free bees and they've done great here. And then I personally, or I know folks who will bring those queen lines up, or better yet, even nukes with drones, bring those up to an area, put them in an isolated outyard, and they absolutely fall flat on their face. I think there's something to do with what the bees have no matter the genetic line or strain, the bees have a greatest potential that they can perform, they can produce. And I think that when that's matched with the right environs, the correct ecosystem, the soil microbiology, then all those things line up. But if you do have bees that, if they are adapting locally, if they are, to slight nuances with all that, if you take it out of its context and then bring it somewhere else, is it going to adapt? Sure, it will 100% adapt, but maybe it's not necessarily the best fit in that snapshot in time. I think they will adapt. They will get it together, except for sometimes you may have specific locations that for whatever reason do poorly. You know, Bruce has struggled with one yard specifically. That yard's gone. We have had certain areas too. Actually, some of our early experience, we didn't even know any better. But putting a bunch of bees on a north-facing slope with springside seeps and heavy clay anaerobic soil, like I had no idea. I know now what to look for. I will never ever put a yard of bees there ever again. But there are so many things that we want to pretend that we've got this whole thing together. We want to pretend as though we know, it's a worker bee is 21 days and a queen is 16 and a drone is 24 and here's the protein, right? But there are all these beautiful mysteries that we are never going to know with our bees, but also with the landscapes, water and electricity and vibrations and frequencies and magnetism, all these different things that we can't see, we don't even know. There are things that a lot of folks believe in, things as simple as ley lines, where there are energy fields within the soil itself, within the bedrock, within moisture, that creates these energy fields that animals know. Deer will bed in a certain area and they will for 40 or 60 years, and they're attracted to certain areas where, for whatever reason, it's not out of the realm of possibility that bees do the same thing, but are also perform poorly in certain areas for certain reasons. And so that's a really interesting comparison, that your home yard there, or not your home yard, but the hunter yard did poor. And then when you brought bees back from the almonds, they did poor, but those same genetic lines in the hunter yard and from the almonds in other yards did beautiful. That's a really great, solid point of reference.
Yeah.
Greg,
I've had yards that were just 4 or 5 miles apart that just looked completely different. Like, they would have, one of them would do really well. The other one they might both do well, but they'd be on a little different time schedule. Like right now, for example, my southern yards are just ahead of my northern yards, which are only like 20 miles apart, north to south. So it's just like they're just different. They look different. And so even within the same county or the same, within the same geographical area, colonies can look totally different, like what you're saying, Emily. And I shut my Ozark bee yard down. It was really good during honey production time, like from about now until, maybe mid to late June. And then the rest of the year, you have to keep them alive. You have to feed them. They just don't have hardly anything coming in. It's right in the middle of the woods. It's an open area, but there are woods. There's not fields and stuff around much. And so during honey production, they do great. And otherwise, and last year I ended up with some real problems and lost most of those colonies and finally just shut it down this past weekend. So, yeah, it is amazing how even in a small local geographical area, you can have yards that look completely different.
I'm thankful that, Greg, when you're saying that, you have a problem with this yard, and Bruce, you got a problem with that yard there. I got a problem with a yard and I only have one. I just can't win.
Well, when it's negative 15 degrees for 3 weeks in a row, that might have something to do with it.
Yikes.
Yep. Honestly,
Yeah.
I just don't know how any bees survived up there with those bitter cold temperatures as long as they were cold like that. It blows me away that they can those little insects any of them can survive that. So
it'll be all right.
Mm-hmm.
And
it'll be fine.
Les, you guys want to see if there's any questions or comments we can talk about here? I've started folks in the comments. I've started quite a few things here. So once again, if you want to ask a question or make a comment, leave it in all caps. It's easier to see, and we may or may
Bruce,
not.
you got some questions for Emily there. If you want to put them on the screen.
Yeah, I'm trying to tell them the ones we have starred.
You've got Tom. You got one from Tom Nolan back at 8:32.
Yeah, I'm on them now. I'm gonna start.
We could just talk all night about all the weird, interesting, nuanced things that only some of us goofballs would know, and then especially, just think about the stuff that Ohio, Michigan folks could just geek out on.
Sure.
But there are folks with some questions here tonight. There.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll start with the one from Tom. Now, Tom Nolan, he's the guy he's the North American rep for Formic Pro. So he's a big dog in here, but he says, can you talk about equipment and infrastructure challenges going from 7 colonies to 100 to 200 colonies? Yeah, how do you do that? You're in the middle of doing something like that now, maybe a little bigger scale than that, but still it's the same principles. So what kind of thoughts would you have for him scaling up from 7 to 1 to 200 colonies?
Infrastructure let me back up. So the biggest thing is honestly having enough capital. Because equipment nowadays is pretty expensive. So we bought 300 boxes, and it was a pretty penny to buy all of those. So this year we ended up signing up for a farm operating line of credit. So that's how we're getting everything going with that. But having capital and having the yards is the biggest thing. Casey's been scrambling for the last couple weeks, just trying to get yards set up because we're like, hey, okay, we need to have an extra 10 yards in about 4 weeks to put all the splits we're about to make on. Otherwise, they're all going to be jam-packed in one area. We usually like to do about 24 hives is really the max I want to put in a yard. Otherwise, then they're competing. I want to make sure that they're actually able to get some good nutrition in because feeding, it works. You can feed them syrup and you can feed them pollen patties, but nothing really beats having fresh, real pollen coming in or actual nectar. In particular, the pollen I've noticed has been a game changer with just helping them overwinter a lot better. Just making the connections to find the yards is the biggest thing, and then just having the capital to be able to buy all the equipment. We were wanting to so we just bought a flatbed diesel as well, and we bought a trailer. The trailer was so that we could then buy a bobcat, but after running the finances and everything, we decided we need to wait maybe about 12 more months before we can pull the trigger on that, just because it'd be a lot to pile on right now.
Yeah, you're going all in. How many? What's your goal colony wise in the next year or two? What are you trying to get up to?
I think Casey and I talked about 350, but I also know I have a problem with shooting too high sometimes. So wherever we end up, as long as I get my 59 pallets for almonds this year, I'm happy.
Yeah. You've never been known to shoot for lofty goals, Emily. What are you talking about?
Not at all.
I kind of, my strategy has been a little bit different. I have, I think I'm to the point now to where I probably could shoot up if I was able time wise to do it. I could probably double. I'm probably sitting at 130 to 140 now. Maybe I could double every year. You could double pretty easily, I think, if you keep whatever you have left.
Mm-hmm.
What I did, I took it a little more slowly. I started off. I just try to pay for everything as I go, and so sometimes that's agonizingly slow. It seems like, and frustrating. But I've kind of got a pretty good little niche in the honey market here. I've got a lot of good customers in some stores, and I may have almost maxed out what I can do though. And honey has been my driver as far as money goes to be able to afford the equipment. So, I used to scrap and scrape like what you're doing. I always most of the frames I've had, I've bought already either full frame, one piece plastic frames or frames. Like I bought a whole pallet from Greg, 700 frames, a couple months ago, already put together, the Pura frames. And so I learned, I did order from Premier back before. I just ordered a whole pallet of 1,200 frames that were not put together and foundation, and that's just, I still got a couple hundred of those to do, but I actually bought a frame, a jig to put them together with. And that's not, I'm just don't have the time. I don't want to do that. So, but I'm to the point now where I can afford, because I've taken it kind of slow, I can just afford like to pay for things. But if you really want to grow fast, I think you're doing what you have to do. You're out there getting it. But for Tom, Tom is looking at probably growing. He's talking about growing about to what I'm at. And so it really depends, Tom, I think, on how fast you want to get there. If you're talking about doing it in a year or two, you're going to have to lay down some cash, like what Emily talked about. But if you want to do it a little more slowly and kind of try to stay ahead of it, you can pay for it as you go. If your goal is to be commercial, sometimes I think you have to take a step out there and take some risk and do some things. But if you have the time, if you have the ability to, you can also take a more slow and a pay as you go type of approach as well. And that's kind of what I've chosen to do. But other people, they just jump out there and they can do well doing it. Just everybody's got to figure it out on their business plan. I know, Greg, that you have actually, you're in the middle of that. You've grown your business just the last few years. You've really kind of been able to. You might be really good to talk to this because you've done it. You're on the other end of it. You're still growing.
Just like,
look at it, just came out of nowhere there. Look at that.
That is awesome.
But Greg, I know that you've kind of, you're on the.
He said he's gonna wave.
You're on the end of it now to where you've done what you're talking about doing, or what the question is from Tom. So what are some tips you would have for Tom, maybe?
It's never ending. I mean, it's always like you're never where you want to be, but if you can be thankful and appreciate where you are, that's like the most important thing. And then not allow where you think you want to be to dismay you from digging in and enjoying the experience where you're at right now. Like everybody else, had lawn tractors and trailers with feed riding out to bee yards that should have never had bee yards in, and then a four-wheeler or this or that, and then the business grows and you stop assembling frames and you start buying them by quantity and you start buying them by the skid, and then one day you have the beautiful opportunity like Emily and Casey where they've got a flatbed truck all of a sudden, and now it's like, how did we do anything in life, like anything, without a flatbed? And all of a sudden, you start to create leverage. And the word that I love the most, force multiplier. There are some things that are absolutely force multipliers, like a flatbed truck, because now everything is saving you an enormous amount of labor, and you can do a lot more with resources that you do have. And it catapults you to the next thing. Now it's like, okay, well, now we need a bigger trailer because this truck can pull something bigger. And now we can put X amount more on it. And then you start thinking, okay, how can we mechanize this, make this easier to move things around? And it's never ending, because now it's a skid steer, and it's okay. Do we want a bobcat, a Kubota, a dedicated Hummer bee, or a swinger? Which way do we want to go? But it never ends, because then it becomes honey house upgrades, or pumps, or extractors, or getting squared away to send a whole load of bees out to the almonds. And then it never ever actually stops ever. But if you can get good and appreciate where you are now, and don't let where you want to be prevent you from enjoying the ride right now. And this is like the most cliche thing in the world. Everyone's going to say, just roll their eyes. But I mean, I love when I look back at a lot of the moves. Have you ever seen, there's a really great meme, and it's almost like as bad as those, like, those like from the 80s and 90s, like in the boardrooms, there's like the framed inspirational quote, like teamwork, or all those things, right? And it's like a picture of a ripple effect, and you're just like, really? I mean, so this is sort of like that too. But have you ever seen there's like I guess it would be like a, what do you call it, like a meme or thing, where it's like the idea of it is there is somebody trying to climb two ladders, and there's one ladder with very huge rungs, and the rungs are so tall the person can't even reach the next one. And on the other ladder are these little rungs that are achievable and doable, right? If you look at the rungs and say, oh my gosh, I want a 1-ton flatbed, and then a gooseneck trailer, and then a skid steer, and then I need 432 colonies to send to the almonds. And like, if that is all you're focused on, you're going to be reaching for rungs you can't grab. And even if you could grab them, you wouldn't have the grip to hold yourself there long enough to pull yourself up. And so you learn by getting these smaller rungs and going up one step at a time, realizing that it is not a race with anybody else, right? It's all about you and the journey that you're on, and challenging yourself and enjoying the ride. Because the fact of the matter is, I believe this 100%, that God's got a plan for us all, and it's not the same. Not a single, none of our journeys are the same. They're not supposed to be. They are all going to be different. And when you accept that and just enjoy the journey that you're on, you will find that there has been monumental rungs that we have hit, and you spend 10 years dreaming of the day where you're putting both hands on the rung and you're lifting up, right? And then you find yourself doing that, and guess what you're doing? Oh, you're going up to the next. There's no time. You're spending zero time being, wow, this is awesome, we finally got here. You're just on to the next thing. And so what I found is, we're so focused on the destination or getting to that rung that we are losing the joy and happiness of the ride, of the journey. And so the cliche statement that it's not about the destination, it's about the journey, or I find a million ways to say it, is 100% true. And there are so many things you learn and dial in, grabbing the rungs that you can reach, that you would never have the opportunity to do if you were just trying to stretch. You stretch too many times, and all of a sudden you lose it. You lose the whole thing.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. You have to enjoy it as you go, or else you'll be miserable. If you're always looking at, looking for the goals, like, why can't I do that? Why aren't if you're always trying to look above where you're at, you want to have your sights set high, but you also have to be able to enjoy the journey while you're on it. Great. That's some great advice right there. See, next comment, we got a comment here from Brian, Flower Street Farm, Jen and Brian. My double nukes overwinter really well, and I have as much brood, if not more, than my double deep 8 framers. That's true. I mean, nukes bees just love those 5-6 frame boxes. They just love them. They'll shoot up in them. And I've had real good success actually here. I haven't done them much lately, but I have done quite a few overwintering in 5/5s or 5 frame nuke boxes. I've had good success with that. So that is I've had that experience as well.
Yep, same here. Casey runs a lot of the double story nukes in his breeding yard. And we just actually went through those and seeing the exact same thing. They have more brood than the overwintered 10 framers.
Yeah. All right, Emily, next question. Do you graft your own queens? And if so, when do you plan on starting queen grafting this year? It's a great question from Jason Seward.
So luckily, I don't have to graft my own queens because Casey is a wizard at that. So he's our queen breeder. He's really the brains behind all of it. He has a passion for being able to just sit there and look at all the fine details, whereas I kind of sometimes get so ahead of myself that I forget to look at the little details, and instead I'm looking at like the big picture and the steps and all of that. So he's been working on his genetic line for the last, I think, 7 years now. His main breeder is Viplidu, is what we call her. He named her after a part at the factory he works at.
Nice.
He's a fabricator, so he welds aluminum. I thought he said like his manager had said like, "Oh, you should name it after this part," and it was called Viplidu. And he's like, "Okay, I will."
Okay. She must be a tough. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So he puts them through various stress tests. He's kind of coined that term, I feel like now. He's always saying, "Oh, this is this year's stress test, and I did this stress test that last year." And then everything is treatment free in that yard. So that's the experimental yard that you guys have been kind of briefly noting. We call it B Yard 51, kind of like Area 51.
That is
a little
awesome.
cheesy.
I like
Yeah.
I love the fact that you're doing that, though, that you have a place where you can experiment like that and you can kind of play around with it without having to feel like you have to do that with all your bees. It just makes a lot of sense to do something like that.
Yeah.
Let's see. This is I think we were talking earlier about how the lessons we've learned from failures that I've had, and we were talking about that earlier. And Jason Egan, he's out in Utah. He said, like painting Big Red, now I always tap my pen on an object before painting the queen. For those of you who followed my channel for a couple of years, you know I just basically tried to drown a queen with a red a couple years ago, and it was kind of one of those competitive advantage paint markers like Greg sells, and she got doused, and excuse me. She got doused, but she survived. And I tell you what, when you open the hive up, she stood out like a neon light. It was kind of that fluorescent red color, and she survived. She did well. Now those bees were really feisty, so I wasn't too sad to see her go. But yeah, they cleaned her off. I thought she was going to die. She acted like she was dead for about. It took them like 30 minutes to get her going, but then she did really well.
Here we go. Jeremy says,
"Oh boy, let's go."
Big Blue 2025.
Yeah, I've been more careful, and I've gotten a lot better at painting the queens. And now that I say that, because in that video, if you remember watching that video, right before I marked her, I said, "I'm getting the hang of this," and then I just doused her in that marker. I just
Pride goes before a fall. There you go.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Dwayne Bittinger says, we were talking about mentors. YouTube was my mentor. Dwayne's the one that won he's the one that won Instant Vep Light, I think, a few weeks ago on the chat. So,
you doing that to Big Red, it's like last year, I've got one of those, Emily, the one-handed queen catcher, and you put it down on the frame, and then you slide that piece and it goes up, and there's a queen excluder so the workers can get out, but the queen stays in there. And they always tell you be careful with it, because when you slide that piece up, make sure you don't pinch the queen. I probably had my best queen. The colony was, oh gosh, it was my large one last year. It was 6-7 boxes high. I about cut the queen's head off going to marker. And she kind of shriveled up and was shaking a little bit. And I was like, oh.
Don't you love when they do that? They go into like a freeze. They play dead.
It's like a fainting goat. They just fall over and they're just.
That's the wildest thing in the world to see that. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So I learned at that moment that queens really don't like being decapitated.
Yeah.
So
you don't say.
Yeah.
I don't think that grows back.
No, super glue didn't fix it. Yeah.
Got a great. Maybe it did for your entomology, project where you pinned
right.
it doesn't work for them to live and actually produce.
Exactly.
Stan Gore, Stan is one of our. We appreciate having Stan on here tonight. He says simplicity. We were talking about simplicity earlier and kind of trying to simplify and be more efficient. He says simplicity. I have one box I use, one hive tool, one frame I use, one feeder. I use one hive stand to set up, one bee suit I wear, one style of bee glove I use, one smoker, and 2 types of fuel. That's all. And Stan he does his bee yard, he uses the app and makes, I think he uses that 7 frame hives, and everything looks exactly uniform and perfect. And that's something that I think a lot of us probably aspire to that. I am far from that, but simplicity is key, and it's so important. And I think Greg, you're getting more in that aspect of it. You're getting more simplified, I think, with how you keep your bees and everything. You got that goal and you're working towards that, but I'm still trying to figure it out. Brian, you have a pretty good handle on what you like your hives to look like as well, I think. So, but I'm getting better at it. Emily, do you have any particular type of configuration you like? Do you like single deeps, double deeps, deep and medium for your brood box? What are your thoughts?
I mean, everything we have is deeps, just because we thought in terms of investing into equipment, it'd be a little bit cheaper. If we just all have deeps, then we can use them for honey. We could set ones aside for honey, and then
Interchangeable.
I don't know. Yeah, just makes it easy.
Yeah, my problem with all deeps is just, those things are heavy and I'm getting old.
Yeah, they can be.
Ideal it would be cool if everything could be the same size for me, but that's just I deeps and mediums. But here's a good question from Jason. I think he put this in here when we were talking about some of the problems. I think nutrition and lack of food sources are the triggers for lots of colony problems, even more than mites. What do y'all think about that? I personally just kind of think it's a combination. I do think here's 2 things I noticed with my bees is that when it's kind of going back to what Kamen says, and we've talked about a lot here on the channel, is that, great queens, dead mites, and proper nutrition are key. I think, in my opinion, when I've had a younger average age of queens, my bees just look better. They look more healthy, more vibrant. I don't know if you guys have noticed that or not, but just younger, more healthy and vibrant queens seem to just everything does better. I do know that obviously mites are a problem, but then you couple the really good queens with proper nutrition, and you can go a long ways with that. I think that's kind of my opinion. I know the mites will pass viruses along, but maybe, just throwing this out there, maybe younger, more vibrant queens produce more vibrant bees. I'm not sure, or I don't know if that's true or not. And then maybe with the right type of food, they're just tougher, just better bees. I don't know what you think about that. I know my colonies look healthier when they have a younger, more vibrant queen in there.
I think that nutrition is almost the backbone to everything. Just with what I've learned in the last couple years with pollen and how it raises vitellogenin, and vitellogenin is what helps them survive through the winter and keeps them strong, and it's what the mites actually feed on. So if you start at the very beginning and make sure they have a good amount of real pollen coming in, then they can build up nicely. I mean, you guys have probably seen before when a pollen flow shuts off, your colony starts going backwards, cluster sizes start to shrink. So I think I think that could be a big factor in the bee collapse that we're seeing this year, just because there's so many stressors on the bees. And I think we've been kind of coming close to this. We've been kind of like on the edge, like we're walking a tightrope. And this year was just a tipping point that we jumped off because maybe one more thing got into the mix. But I think nutrition, if we got that down, I think the bees could really kind of weather anything else that comes their way.
I think we're gonna probably the root cause for a lot of what we see, I think, could potentially be way simpler than we want to accept. Not that it's not complicated, but in all the conversations that I've had with folks from all over the country, the folks that seem to be doing the worst with this were folks who had extreme weather events, and then and also had very poor fall protein opportunity for the bees. And we say it all the time. If the 4 of us were saying we're going to be survivalists in the wintertime in the Midwest, and we all have our own unique skill sets, right? Hunter, gatherer, and fire maker, and all those different things that would make this work as a unit, like that's great. But like, what if Emily twists her ankle and Brian gets pneumonia and Bruce starts to get an ear infection and I crack a rib? Like, even things that are like, they're problems, but they're not like dire in and of itself. Like, if the winter was a set uniform thing that we could adapt to, no big deal. But if our food source, as we're doing all this, if now we don't have the proper nutrition, our bodies can't withstand. It has a very hard time withstanding any of the ebb and flow normally. And then you throw extreme weather events on top of all of that too. Like, it is just one thing after another. And I think for so many years we've even seen where you get, maybe the fall protein buildup wasn't as good as it has been in the past, but we've had these kind of lukewarm, mediocre, ridiculous nonsense Midwest winters where it got a little cold, but it was more wet and mud season than anything. And the bees, while that was hard on the bees, like they could just get through it. And yeah, we sustained loss, but we made it through the other side. You take all of those, and now we had even worse of a fall nutritional profile. Like Emily, did you guys have much of a? Did you have? Were your bees hitting fall goldenrod or aster in your neck of the woods?
Yes, they were. This year, thankfully, was a really good year for all of our fall pollen. Because I had some yards that were last year was a weird year, to be honest. So we had hives swarming early, and then we had hives trying to swarm in July, but then we also had a dearth all throughout like late May through mid-June too, which normally that's when we get a lot of black locusts and a really good flow usually comes on then. So the bees were looking kind of like not where I really wanted them to be about mid-July. And luckily we did start to get some of that fall pollen, and that was actually starting to build them up. And that's why I keep stressing, I think real pollen is a game changer, just because during that time I was still feeding pollen patties, but the bees were just kind of like, they would eat it, but it was like they were just laughing at it like, we're not going to build up like that. Okay, we'll eat it, but we're not going to do anything.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until they started getting some pollen coming in, then you started seeing them grow like they should be.
I think that's super, super important, because I do feel bees are livestock. But if you watch a cow's pasture start to go downhill, that cow will lose condition so fast, and it takes so long to build back up. And I think what we saw, at least where Brian and I are at in this part of the drought belt, we had even the third variety of goldenrod, which is typically the one they go bananas for, that and the asters. Like, they weren't touching. It was a ghost town. Like, the bumblebees were barely on the goldenrod this year, and goldenrod produced zero nectar. So it was so nutritionally upside down that even the pollinators were leaving it alone like it was nothing. So you have in that time snap, you have the old foragers are to be bringing the pollen back to the colony for the nurse bees, so the nurse bees can be nursing the winter bees that are hatching. And when there is no incoming natural pollen in August and September, like, that's a major, major problem. And our dearth started just after Father's Day in June, and it went downhill from there. So you're talking about, if we could look at the nutritional complexity with the proteins, I don't even think we were anywhere close to having the bees where they needed to be. And I don't, as much as I love Hive Alive and all the supplements, like, those things help, but nothing, hands down, is ever going to take over. Nothing's going to ever reproduce natural proteins and natural nectars. And when the bees didn't have that, they were not in a position to withstand some of the severe weather that we had eventually seen. I mean, all of a sudden, I would assume, maybe Emily, the same for you, all of a sudden Ohio and Michigan turned into northern Canadian beekeepers, and we just weren't we're not set up for that. The bees weren't nutritionally even close to being set up for it. And it was just like, I hope we figure this thing out, but I'm also afraid it's as simple as a bunch of really stupid things stacked up for the first time ever, and maybe we don't see that again. I don't know.
I see too. I like what Randy said about the leaky boat.
Yeah.
You know, you have one issue and it's like that little leak, and you add in another issue, there's another little leak. And I said, even before that conversation, I said it was almost like a perfect storm. You know, if we all remember that movie, it was just like this perfect scenario. Because last year, like here in my area, we started super early. You know, we had swarms early April that literally never happens. Like I had talked to people and they were like, you know, they had been keeping bees for 20 years and they're like, they've never seen swarms that early in April in this area. So our season started way early, and we had, in my area, we had twice the normal rainfall in April and May. So it annihilated like that period where your queens need to get out and mated and you're getting that early nutrition in. They couldn't fly. We had so much rain that it was just ridiculous. And then we went to, like, you know, Greg said, we went to that drought, and it was like, geesh. So we went from one extreme to the other, you know. So I almost say it's like that it was a perfect storm, you know. You add in so many different issues and it just annihilated colonies. So, and whether you are, you know, and I see people in here saying, oh, this and that, treatment free, whether you treat or whatever, you know, I've talked to people that, you know, Greg, you know, somebody that lost 44 out of 45. Whether you're treatment free or whether you do treat, and you're a beekeeper and you suffer 44 out of 45 loss, you got to have a little, you know,
tenacity.
There's got to be a spot. Well, there's got to be a spot in your heart where you can kind of step back and just say, oh man, that stinks, and not sit there and bash those people, you know? So.
Yeah, I think with this nutrition thing, and then we'll move on. You know, Emily, I know you trained, I guess you were a college athlete. I know you were training at a pretty high level there for a while, but I know that, and I played a little ball as well. And then my son actually hiked all through the big national trails, the Appalachian and Continental Divide and the Pacific Crest. And, you know, you can tell your body knows when you don't have proper nutrition. You know, it knows what empty calories are, you know, and I know that, I'm sure that when you were running, and I know when I was playing ball with my son, he said when he was on the trail, you know, your body just, it can't do what it can. If it doesn't have the right nutrition, it just can't do what it has to do. No matter how hard you try, no matter where your mind is, if you don't have the energy, you can't do it. And that applies. I mean, bees are always burning energy when they're flying and moving around. And so if they don't have the proper nutrition to have the right kind of energy they need to go collect everything, then they can definitely be weaker. Anyway, I thought that was a good comment there, Jason. We appreciate you commenting here. Let's see. We'll kind of whip through these questions here. Andy Moore says, I lost my queen. It will be about 2 or 2.5 weeks before my new one arrives. How do I introduce a new queen into a broodless old bee population colony? Introduce a brood frame from another.
When in doubt, egg it out.
Yeah, I think you start putting that in there now. Just keep some young, just keep some in there now, and kind of keep a young pop. You need to have some young population in there, I would say. And so if you can put some new frames of brood in there, kind of 1 or 2 frames, kind of nurse it along, that's probably a pretty good idea. But if you're not careful, they'll make their own queen. So,
well, but figure though too, if it's 2 to 2.5 weeks, I mean, 2.5 weeks, you're looking at the point that if you throw a frame in there and they create a cell, I mean, they're going to raise their own.
I'm saying, yeah.
You know, almost in that time, you're only going to sacrifice a little bit of time where she's going to have to go out and mate, but then you don't have to worry about any acceptance because they've created their own queen. So
the timeline on that's a little tricky. Emily, when you look at that timeline, what are your concerns with waiting 2.5 weeks for a queen? Where do you think they're going to be extremely deficient?
They're gonna need that queen pheromone, so they might go laying workers, especially if they know that they're hopelessly queenless. But my question would be, do you have another colony? Because if you do, you could newspaper combine them and then resplit them when your queen gets here.
Yeah, that's a good call. The big thing that you're going to be upside down on is if at 2.5 weeks with no queen, when you go to introduce that queen, you're going to have a 14 to 20 day. You already are upside down on brood rearing. So by the time that you do introduce that queen, you're going to have no nurse. You're going to have no nurse bees that are be young enough when your queen is laying to do all those tasks and chores. Yes, they can always revert back to the initial duty that they learned first. But I think the main thing to consider is you're going to want to, if you can, if you have another colony, be sure to drop in some frames of sealed brood so you can keep that young workforce moving ahead. Otherwise, you're going to be the queen. They'll accept her. They'll take her. At some point, before you have any nurse bees, everyone's going to be a forager bee in that colony, and you're going to be upside down on the workforce. And so those are the hives that sometimes you think everything is going right, but they're just out of sorts on the delegation of duty. So just know that and then plan accordingly and do what you can. But I sort of like Emily's idea. Just combine those rascals for now and split them out, make a split with all the right age and then the material when your queen comes.
That's a good idea. All right.
I like my saying.
What's that?
I like my saying. When in doubt, egg it out.
Just throw in a frame of eggs and let her rip. Send it.
Let her rip.
I'm always adding. If I don't see a queen or I'm not sure, I'm always putting a frame of eggs and brood in there.
Cheap insurance policy.
Figure it out. This, I think, is kind of an important comment because we have talked so much on here, a fair amount on our channel, but I know, Emily, you've really looked into this as well. You've actually gone across the country and you've had, you've talked a lot about the bee loss, but I think that one thing that Gary says here is there more positive talk about sideliners and commercial beekeepers? I'm kind of tired of discussing CCD. Greg, you talked to Bob Benny a month ago, and he had less than 10% loss coming into 2025. So we do need to also recognize that there are people that are doing good and they're doing well.
Mm-hmm.
The sky is not completely falling, and I think there's been so much focus on the negativity or the difficult times that we kind of forget about the people that are still having success and out there. Personally, I just think a lot of it has to do with just climate type stuff as far as like weather. I think it's just been such a hard year, like what you guys suffered up there. Brian and Greg particularly, I mean, just how do they overcome that? I don't know. Down here, I haven't heard of as much of the loss as I have in other parts of the country. And I think it can vary from place to place, but we do need to, I think, also acknowledge and recognize a lot of people are doing really well and in certain parts of the country. I personally, it was a pretty normal year for me as far as loss goes. Not that this year might be worse, but it wasn't any worse than usual for me. I did have some loss, but I didn't really notice any dramatic things. And so I just think that's a really good comment that Gary said here for us to remember. Yeah, there is a lot of difficult things. We need to work through it, but there's also a lot of people that are doing pretty well and still, doing okay.
Bob's also in a belt and band in the country where a lot of folks in that area are doing really well. And you go a little bit north of him and the wheels fall off the wagon, and you go south of him and the wheels fall off the wagon. There are these rainbow effect belts that start from north of Orlando, where there is a belt of doom and then everything's fine, and another belt of doom and then everything's fine. And a lot of those, when you look at those patterns, to me, I see hurricane bands and rain bands and wind bands, and then you go up and that's drought bands, and all of those things all ended up affecting late season nutrition and early spring growth. I think that is a lot of what we see. But the reason this is in the forefront and why everyone is still talking about it is when everything's going well and everyone's making money and no one's losing, there's no problems to sort out. But when everything is going bad wrong, and it's going bad wrong widespread, while folks may get tired of hearing about it, there still are a lot of us who still have the tourniquet on and are trying to stop the bleeding and are looking for answers and looking for results and trying to drag ourselves and limp through the process right now. So you're going to have to get comfortable hearing a lot more about this for a lot longer period of time until we all officially get past this and get into this next mode. And just because you hear us talking about it doesn't mean that we're not also looking for the future, looking towards the future, or putting plans in place. But when you are in the trenches, literally in this sort of situation, we've got to be okay talking about it and sharing ideas and even hashing out some of the old things we've already said a million times, because there may just be a little detail or a little thing, a little flash in the pan that resurfaces because we have one more extra conversation, and all of a sudden that sparks some change, or that sparks an idea, or I say this and Emily says, well, you know what? I did see that, and I heard about this person who said that, and these things go on and on and on. That's the fact that that's where we're at with this. But
that's one thing I think that this community is so good about is kind of piggybacking on and stacking different ideas together and hopefully coming up with solutions, maybe a little faster than in the past. But Jason from Bohemia says Bob Benny is on point with Newcomb and bee nutrition. He runs a very controlled and well dispersed yards. And Steve Amos also talks about how he stays away ahead of the farmers sprayers and things like that. So, Bob does a great job, but Bob's been doing it. He's been doing it forever. I'm sure Bob has had some years where he struggled and had some issues. And he talks about, didn't he, Greg, about how there's just every few years, there's just kind of
every 20 years, there's a drop off and we build back. Delmer and some of his early mentors would have probably told him the same thing. This has been happening since the eon of time with livestock and with genetics and with populations. This is just, we don't want to accept it because it hurts, but it's a part of what's going on, and it probably always will be. That's the natural order of things. It doesn't make it easier, but it is what it is. The thing that we have to, I think, appreciate and understand and accept is we may never get to the bottom of any of this, and that's okay. There are some things that are just they seem so outlandishly ridiculous that you can't cry about it. You can't hang your head about it. You can just say, well, I don't get it. I don't understand it, but we're going to keep digging in with the same exact genetics, same boxes, same frame, same feed, same protein, same syrup, same everything, right? Friends of ours 1.1 miles away who do everything identical, like it is a mirror yard of us. It's our genetics, it's everything, right? They're at an 80-some% survival rate. You know what the big difference is? And it's something that it's so absolutely ridiculous. The big difference, the only difference, is that our rear end is exposed to the western wind, something fierce, and the yards that had the worst loss, where we had -29 with wind chills and 40-mile-an-hour sustained for several days in a row. They're 1.1 miles away. Everything is the same. They've got a beautiful western windbreak, like basics, little tiny details, right? Where for years we've gotten by just fine on these hillsides out here. Not this year. Like these things may not be as complicated everywhere as we want to make them out to be, but it doesn't make it any easier to sort of move past all these things. Emily, what is something that you and Casey are really excited about for this new season?
Oh gosh, just everything that's in store. Targeting 59 pallets is a real challenge to be able to have them in double deep boxes, all be heavy too and ready to go, all make grade too. They have to be about an 8 frame average across the brood box. So I'm just excited to see what this year has in store. I did want to kind of mention a couple things on the comment that you had put up there about how pretty much the whole beekeeping industry keeps talking about CCD. I think part of it too. So one of the things that I learned really quickly when we went out to California and was chatting with multiple different commercial beekeepers, and some of them run about 20,000 hives, some of them 30 or 40,000 hives. The main thing that I just kept hearing over and over again is that the commercial guys are tired. So I think kind of why we keep seeing this coming up is just that there's been so many things going on that the commercial guys are kind of getting strangled in a way by all of the other external stressors that are coming at them in terms of like the bee health. You have just the price to all of your inputs is going up. You have your honey prices are pretty much in the dirt. So it's really hard for them to even break even from year to year, not even counting some of the ones that are in debt. So I think that is kind of also contributing to why it keeps coming up, just because we're reaching a point where we need change. And if there isn't change and we keep going on this path, it's only going to keep getting worse. Because even too, I mean, pollinating all of the world or all of the country's food is definitely not an easy task, just because when you put, I mean, Bruce, you can probably talk about this a little bit. When you put bees out for pollination, you think, okay, those bees are going to do really good. They're bringing in tons of pollen. They're bringing in probably nectar, something like that. But really, almonds is kind of like the only outlier that they come back looking good. I've been told many times, and I've seen bees that go in to, like, say, blueberries, watermelons, apples, cherries. They come out looking really stressed and not too happy. I mean, part of that is just from probably some of the stuff that's getting sprayed while they're out there too. But then you're in this one area that is just one plant, one tree, one bush across acres, tons and tons of acres of land, and you don't have that diversity and nutrition like we were talking about that the bees need. So really, I think this is kind of like an outcry from the commercial guys saying like, hey, we need to find some changes, otherwise they're not going to be here anymore in the next 20 years possibly.
Monoculture is
Bloom,
fantastic.
Yeah, I think I think the it's an industry that's constantly shifting, and I think and I might be wrong on this, but I think the average age of beekeepers is getting older. There are some good young ones, so we need some good young people like yourself, Emily, and others to come step up. And there are some really good right
She
here.
called us old, Brian. I mean, this guy.
Of course, you
Unbelievable.
He's older than
Calling
us.
us old.
I'm the old guy in the chat, so I'm
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Okay, Grandpa.
That is a true statement. I do have grandbabies, so
There you go.
Anyway, a couple of really good young beekeepers here locally. Tyler Walker and Matthew Walker. We have Matthew on here a few weeks ago, and so the next generation's coming up. But there are a few things we could go. That could be an entire chat talking about what we need to do to help move the bee industry forward. But I do tend to agree with that. It's just obviously there are always challenges. I think the challenges get to be more and more over time. But I really liked Bob's interview, or Greg's interview with Bob, because Bob just kind of takes it in stride. He says about it. I think, didn't Randy Oliver say something similar as well, that every few years there's just almost a catastrophic thing that happens, and somehow beekeepers can continue to survive. But yeah, it's a challenging thing, especially if you're trying to go big time and become a commercial beekeeper. We have a few more questions. Let's see. I don't know, Brian, could you flag that one from Sean? Sean wanted to ask Sean there, Urban Bees. But anyway, we can go rapid fire on a few more questions here before we start to wrap it up. That's okay. It's just near the end here. Sean, he wanted Emily or Greg to answer a question.
Ladies first. Emily, the question is, Emily or Greg, I just got 2 colonies from almonds with lots of drones in different stages. Would they be enough to start grafting? My local bees don't have drones in Michigan. So Emily, Sean's in Michigan. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on the number of drones in 2 colonies, if that would be enough for mating for him?
So Casey would definitely be a better one to answer this. I don't know if he's listening right now and he wants to run over here. But the drones would definitely be enough for grafting. The main thing that you would want to worry about is the temperatures, because right now we've been having, oh gosh, I mean, we finally hit 50 degrees today, but it's on a roller coaster, just up and down. We have a 60-degree day, and then we'll have like a 35-degree day too. Oh, no, here he is. Did you want to? Okay. So really, I'd be more concerned about what's your weather going to be like over the next few weeks. Can you quiet that? over the next few weeks versus the drones. But the drones will definitely be enough for you to start grafting.
Greg, I know you're a queen breeder. What do you? One thing I noticed when Greg was down here is we actually looked at the drones to see how mature they were, and Greg showed me how to do that. Obviously, the more drones, the better. So he's saying he just has 2 colonies from the almonds.
Looks like two colonies from the almonds with lots of drones in different stages. I mean, you could certainly look at the colonies and see how many drones you had in there, but then the conversation goes, well, how many drones do you need for proper mating? Then the question goes, we're talking about grafting. We don't need the drones for grafting. We need the drones for mating. If you start grafting today, you're going to be somewhere, let's say 18 to 23 days or so on a mating flight. So what's the weather going to be looking like in that time frame? The drones and the almond bees would definitely be mature enough. Will you have drones in your own colonies? I don't know. You have to take a look at that. But I think what Emily said there, the weather, the temperature is probably going to be the biggest thing. Is even if you had mature drones in those colonies, and even if you were successful with your cell starter being this cold, you may not have the actual flight weather in that time frame for that queen to even go get mated. And let's also not forget that it's one thing to be able to graft and make queens, but what's really going to make a quality queen is having a cell starter that is extremely squared away, juiced up, full of nutrition, and all that work goes back to what you're doing right now. Sounds like it might be a hair early to be considering trying to graft, unless you have got a bunch of colonies that all came back from the almonds. You've got a bunch of drones, and you've got a lot of really solid nutrition. I think you might be pushing it a little bit. Casey would be, I'm not sure what part of Michigan they're in, but he would be a better resource for you as far as when to go. Here locally in East Central Ohio, when we have red buds and crab apples blooming, you can do no wrong. And it is hot and heavy queen grafting season. I typically start because Easter is a moving target, and so we start grafting typically the Monday after Easter, and that has been like the earliest. It's been beautiful. We could always get it like a week earlier if we want, but Easter's been kind of on point. Emily, when does Casey typically start grafting in your neck of the woods?
Did you hear that question? When do you start grafting? Usually it's in April, I thought. Because it also depends too, because even if the weather's not good, even they won't draw out those queen cells too.
Yeah, to be fair though, I made splits.
You can't hide, Casey. Come on, get in there.
Come up
there
here.
he is. Let's go.
Come over here.
To be
Good
fair,
guy.
I made splits last year. The moment we got our hives back from almonds, I made 21 of them. Out of 21 of those splits, I think 19 did their mating flights. When did we get our hives back from almonds?
Well, last year was a different kind of year. So it was
like 3
we
weeks
got
early.
them the 3rd week of March. And last year, I mean, we had colonies swarming in April.
Yep.
The year prior would probably be a better example. I think you started, it was like 2nd week of April when you started grafting.
I try to time, like, even if I have a lot of drones in my colonies, I still don't like you have plenty of time. If you're not trying to go a million queens, you have plenty of time throughout the season to get queens.
Yeah.
So like, there's no reason to start too early.
Yeah.
You'll get the hang of how nature works, and you'll start to see signs in the environment that'll tell you, now I need to graft. Now I need to,
What are the signs you look for?
Well, I'll start to see, like, because I do graft a little early. So when in my natural hives that didn't come back from California, I will wait until I see like signs of capped drones, and I can tell because I want my queens a little bit early. So I know my hives from California have drones that'll work, and usually by then the weather's nice enough. Like, it's a lot of intuition. Anybody can graft, but when you get really good at it, like starting your cell starter, because like you said, your cell starter matters. If we're talking about grafting, your cell starter matters. It matters more than anything, because you can have if you're gonna, like, because you have 2 colonies come back from almonds. What's your cell starter? Are you going to take the queen out of one of those and use all those bees to do cells? Or are you going to take one of your Michigan hives that's strong enough and do cells? You're still going to have to do a cell starter.
Yeah.
So there's a lot more factors into it. Just, I have 2 big hives. Can I graft queens and make queens? There's just, I mean, if it was me, try it, fail. If you don't like it, try it again next year, fail until you succeed. I mean,
Yeah.
I know I don't give advice much. I'm sorry, guys. I'm not really good at the advice. I'm kind of like a hippie beekeeper. I do it all like my bees talk to me. They tell me what I need to know, and that's just how that goes.
Well, that's like the saying you like to say, do your bees talk to you or do you talk to your bees?
Yes,
Hopefully
I
both.
like to gap the bridge between intuitive and or what is it? I like to bridge the gap between intellectual and intuitive beekeeping. She's more the intellectual side of beekeeping. I'm more the intuitive side of beekeeping.
You guys seem like a great team, so keep up the good work there.
He's back.
We can talk about that, and we probably, this is the time of year. Well, these kind of questions and talks are going to come up, but you know, you quickly get into how many drones do you need in a DCA, how many drones are in a colony, and when you start doing all the math, you know, it's you just have to, like Casey said, you have to kind of know your sign, and until you know the signs, you're going to ask the questions, but don't get in a hurry. Don't rush. You'll know when everything's right, but I would lean on the side of let your Michigan hives, you know, kind of get built up. But most importantly, it does you no good. Just because you can make a queen doesn't do any good if she is not nutritionally squared away. She could be a very poor performer and they end up superseding, or anything else goes wrong. You want that cell starter to be so juiced up, so nutritionally squared away that every cell they make, all that royal jelly, they can tend to all those queens in that prime time and make sure that those queens are super, super healthy. But also, you know, don't, there's a great saying, and it kind of ties in what Casey was saying there too. One of my favorite quotes from the lunatic farmer himself, Joel Salatin, is that perfect is the enemy of good. So don't let the perfect scenario prevent you from just going out and taking a good stab at it and having a good result. Perfect is the enemy of good.
Great stuff. 2 more quick questions, and then we'll probably start to wrap it up. Jason out in Utah. I think this is a pretty subjective question here. He says, how do you know if you have too many hives for your honey production? I guess he means in one spot, like how many, I think that's what he's asking, like how many colonies can you put in one spot? It would be my interpretation of that. I've got a bee yard right now that has 13 pallets. What's that? 52 colonies there. Now 4 of them are empty slots now. But so 48, just say 48, 47, 48 colonies right there. Greg's been to that bee yard. Now there's plenty of stuff around. It's right in the middle of a lot of good resources. It's on a farm at Applin Farms, and there's a lot of stuff around. Last year they made all kinds of honey there. Got another bee yard in Slocum. I think we got 33 there now. And they're going to do great. So I know, Emily, you mentioned you like to put a max of 24 in an area, and some people, you know, and I know people down in Florida, they'll drop a whole, however many they can fit on their truck, their flatbed is what they drop. It might be, you know, it might be 48, it might be, you know, twice that, just depending on what they can drop. It might be somewhere in between. And so I think it just depends on your environment, really. I think, you know, if you're a hobby beekeeper, you probably, I don't know. It just depends. Jason's in Utah. I'm not sure and he lives kind of in a town, and there's a populated area there. I'm not really sure. I think that's what he's asking. How do you know if you have too many hives for honey production? I think that's what he's trying to ask.
If you have to ask, how do you know, you haven't hit that mark yet? Because when you hit the mark, you'll quickly know. Emily, have you found a number for you where there's too many colonies in one yard? If so, what does that look like?
It honestly depends on the yard specifically, because some yards can support more than others. And then you have yards like the hunting yard I've talked about, which can only support probably 0. But yeah, we have other yards that can support, I think we have 24 has been mostly our max. just because I care so much about the nutrition that they are getting, so I don't want to overdo it. But I mean, you got to use what you got is the thing. If you don't have access to a ton of yards, then you just got to work with what you have.
Yep.
Okay, he's got Jason has a follow-up question here real quick. He says, High Plains Desert here, that's in Utah, urban, but close to Thanksgiving Point, which has many floral sources. Only harvested honey 1 out of 3 years with 2 to 3 hives, probably a beekeeper error. Yeah, I think Jason's he's just kind of getting started, but yeah, you can just keep plugging at it, Jason. I know that the flow, it is the desert. It's a desert area, so it's pretty tough out there. But at Thanksgiving Point is down there in the Lehigh, Utah area, and it is an urban area, like you said, but there's also some kind of, there's a lot of wild area around too with different kinds of floral stuff and everything. But just keep plugging at it, Jason. I don't know how many colonies you're allowed to have where you're at. I don't know how big. I think your yard's kind of small. I'm not sure, but you should be able to make a little honey. Just keep working at it. Keep the bees strong, and just see what happens.
When they start robbing and they start getting start to have a little bit, if they need an attitude adjustment and they start robbing, and it's just, those are some real quick signs that it's not going well in those areas. But a lot of it is timing, when to put the supers on, how to build them up before, when to let them go and then let them coast. There's a lot of little nuance that we all have in our own little areas to figure out to get that part right.
Yeah, as far as how much honey is just expected to be produced in a particular bee yard, or in a particular area, it just depends on your area. 1 to 3 colonies, I think if the question is how do you get too much honey, if you have too much honey, if you can't sell it, but with 1 to 3 colonies, you should be able to, you'll get it dialed in, as they say, and I'm sure things are going to work out good for you. It's a lot of fun getting that honey though. And that Utah honey is really good. It's really, really good honey. One last question. This is an interesting question. He says, basically, I think the question is, has anyone used green drone comb in the super for honey? I guess, obviously, I think it works just fine, doesn't it? You could use, if you put it in there and the drones, and they build it out and put honey in it, it should be able to support honey fine, shouldn't it? They'll put it in any kind
of that.
I mean,
that's an interesting question.
This year, because of what we had seen, with the lack of nutrition, is they stopped raising drones very early, this past year, and so they had everything drawn out, or we had maybe a round of drones through there, and then when there was no feed, we started putting feed on. They were backfilling all the drone frames with feed. But here's the thing that I would maybe warn you about, is, at least for me, when I think about all my green frames, they're already drawn out brood frames, so it's a darker wax. That's something you want to be careful with using for honey, because that can discolor your honey. Whereas if it's a clean super wax, it's a little bit different than the brood comb that's just getting trashed by all the bees going in and out and rearing brood and hatching and just doing what the drones do. So that would be the only thing I would be concerned with, is just the how clean the drone comb is, that it could potentially discolor the honey. But will they do it? They will. They 100% will fill up those things. And there's nothing worse when you're trying to get green frames drawn out for drones so you can move them in all your drone yards, and it's just full of honey. But don't get me started, because it's just, I don't like the way the deep plastic frames feel when they're full of honey. They're just these, they just weeble wobble. I mean, anyways. But what do you think, Bruce?
Yeah, if they draw it out, they'll put honey in it. So I don't know if the question is, theoretically, I wonder if he's thinking maybe if the cells are bigger. This is kind of where my mind goes with this. If the cells are bigger from drones, would it hold more honey? I don't know if that's what he's asking or not, but they'll definitely they'll put whatever resources they need to put in those frames, they'll put them in there. If they're trying to make drones, they'll do that. If it's past drone season, they need to store honey, they'll put honey in there, like you said. So I don't think there's any issue with that. That's an interesting question. Let's see real quickly. I appreciate you guys. The super chats. We got Brian with the $20 super chat, Stream Team dialing it in 2025. Pat from Freedom Apiaries, checked my bees the past weekend, and 2 of the 3 colonies have multiple swarm cells. Split those 2. move the queen and let the cells now in a hurry up and wait mode. Fingers crossed. Let's go beekeeping 2025. I agree with that. Let's go for sure. Thanks, Greg, for the super chat. Endura Hive, hashtag be the lighthouse, hashtag stream team. So thank you guys so much. Appreciate it. I figure we could go around the horn here real quick and just kind of see what's going up and what's going on. We'll start off with you, Brian, and then Emily. We'll hear from you for a second. Any famous last words? Any last words you might have, and then we'll kind of start to wrap it up here. So, Brian, go ahead and let us know what's in your immediate future.
You notice, Emily, he started with the one that really doesn't have much to say.
No.
So, I'll tell you, in the next week, our temps are going to start to climb. So I need to go over and just take a peek at the colonies, and I want to get some feed on them here soon. I've got pollen patties now. I would have had, I do small little strips of pollen patties. That way I don't get into any issues with beetles getting up into there. But I would have had it on already. I ran out. So that situation has been remedied. I got a box of patties. So I'm going to get that on and just start to boost them, what I have. And then other than that, it's just, I've been going over periodically and just cleaning equipment, getting stuff ready. And very soon here, I think I was actually looking at the calendar earlier today, and I've got about 4 weeks from now until when I've got to have like everything set. So it's just going to be prep mainly, because I don't want to start this year with where I'm at. I'm kind of behind an 8 ball. I do want to grow, but I'm behind that 8 ball. So I want to have myself positioned in a good spot where I don't further get myself into a corner, so to say. So I want to have everything set up, everything ready, so that I can spend as much time with the bees and moving forward as I can, instead of continuously moving backwards like I have been. So, but it'll be good. I mean, in the next few weeks, I'll probably have more to say about bees, because I think things are going to, weather-wise, I think it's going to change up here pretty soon. So that's all.
Emily, what you got for us?
I could agree with Brian about trying to get everything prepped before all chaos breaks loose. So we've been working on, we got all the boxes painted. We bought 3,500 frames. We've only gone through 2,000 of them so far, putting them together. For some reason, we bought unassembled. Yeah, never again. So we'll be building frames. And then since the hives, they're needing some feed, the ones that came back from California, I'm going to be picking up some syrup here soon to try to get everything fed so that it can start ramping forward, because we're still planning to do splits about the 2nd or 3rd week of April was our plan. So we need everything to kind of be ramped up and going. But then we have one more load of bees. These are the ones that we sent. So the first one's the ones that we bought. And then this last one is the ones that we sent ourselves this year that are going to be coming back probably Monday, I think, is when we're picking them up. Just depends on when the truck's loaded. So I'm really nervous to see how they did.
Well, thanks so much for coming on, Emily. It's been a great conversation, and I appreciate you being here. Been a lot of great conversation in the comments as well, and we've hit on a lot of different topics, and so it's been good having you here. As far as me, I've got my colonies pretty well set up for right now. I do need to add a couple of a few locations I didn't get finished up, like adding, chicken space, adding a honey box or whatever this past weekend. So I'm going to do that this coming weekend. I'm going to start, the way I manage my honey supers is I'll put the first one on top of the colony, let the bees work it a little bit, get up in it, then I come back and put the queen, shake the bees out, put the queen excluder in. And that way it just seems to draw them up better. You do risk having a few eggs here or there, a little bit of brood, but typically by the time we ever harvest, that's all, if there is any up there, it's all emerged and they put honey up there, so it's not a big deal. So that's kind of what I'm doing now, just going back and just kind of spot checking and starting to put queen excluders in and just kind of start. I'm at that point now to where I'm going to start stacking, as the bees need it. And they're pretty well set up. I do have some that are still a little bit weak, some of the newer splits that they didn't have the resources they needed, or they didn't have the population they needed. And we'll watch them pretty close. They may not make honey this year, some of those early splits, but some of them will. And I hope to have a good honey crop. It's weird this year. Our everything's a little behind. Normally by now the trees are leafed out pretty good, I think. And I was at the bee yard, I guess a week and a half ago, and the bee inspector and myself looked around. I'm like, man, the trees still look like wintertime. They're still barren. There are a few like plants. So, the grass is starting to turn green. A few plants are blooming around, but the actual big oak trees and stuff are just barely now starting to kind of leaf out a little bit. And so it's been a strange year. So I hope we actually have a honey crop. Sometimes when the weather is strange, we had a late cold snap here. When the weather is delayed, sometimes some of the flowers just don't seem to bloom as good as other years. Like the privet, for example, is our first big flow down here. And the privet plants are starting to leaf out, but we'll see if they bloom. I hope they do. So that's where I'm at. Not, it's just kind of, I've done a lot of work in the last few weeks, and now we're kind of in a little bit of a holding pattern here for a few weeks. Just going to start stacking honey supers, and we'll be checking them, but not doing as many splits, not doing as much in the hives, having to go through all my colonies and address issues with all of them. I'll be doing some fun things here. I do plan to graft and kind of play around with that a little bit again. That's one thing I do plan to do, and just some things like that. But as far as actual bee work, I think I kind of have them set up pretty good. I'll be doing some things, but we're looking pretty good right now. I hope it continues to be that way. Before we close out, I had a quote, and we've mentioned this quote on here before. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, "That which we persist in doing becomes easier to do. Not that the nature of the thing has changed, but that our power to do so has increased." And I think that is so applicable in all aspects of life, but beekeeping, it couldn't be. We've talked about that tonight, how you just have to try things. You have to work at things. Things are really difficult, but as you do it more and more, as you practice, you try new things and you learn what works for you, it becomes easier. And then once again, it doesn't have anything to do with that the nature of the thing has gotten any easier. It's just that your ability to manage that has increased. And I think that's I love that quote. I've heard that quote for many, many years. I've heard of it a long time ago, and it is true. It's just like lifting weights, exercising. The weight doesn't change, the distance doesn't change that you run, but the ability to do it increases and gets better as you practice and as you work at it. And it's no different with beekeeping or anything else. So on that note, Greg, I'm going to turn it over to you to bring it on home.
Emily, thanks for joining us tonight. Thanks to all the folks who tuned in to learn more about Emily. Emily, for folks who want to find out more about all things bee-fit beekeeping, where can folks find links to anything that you guys have to sell, promote, or you want folks to learn more about you? Where can they find all your info at?
Everything is on YouTube, so BeeFit Beekeeping, and then we also have the website beefitbeekeeping.com.
All right. Well, you guys check out those links. See if you can help Casey name this his new prime queen there, and maybe talk him out of getting a queen or two or a nuke or whatever they have to sell. Be sure to go support what they do. Emily, it's fun having you on. Michigan, it's Michigan, Ohio. You guys are all right. You guys really are doing a great job there in Michigan, and I hope to see you guys again in the future. For everyone listening tonight, we really appreciate you guys tuning into all the chats. And, what I like is there's always such a diversity of folks with experiences here in the comments. The comments are flying by so fast, you can't catch them all. But one thing I think is important for us all, and I think Emily and Casey, Bruce, Brian, myself, and so many are a living testament of that. With beekeeping, you cannot get comfortable. As soon as you get comfortable, you get complacent, and complacency kills. We are living in a time with beekeeping where you cannot marry your ideas, you cannot marry your method, you cannot marry your approach. You've got to be able to adjust, improvise, adapt on the fly. And if you don't, you might be caught between a rock and a hard place. That's a story for a different day, but we really appreciate you guys so much. The next week coming up here at the farm It's just a lot of shop stuff. Shops open Friday, Saturday, 10 to 5. And next, not this coming Saturday, but next Saturday, Brian, what is that date? That would be
April 5th.
April the 5th. The Stream Team folks are going to hear it first. April 5th will be the Learning Yard kickoff with this guy will be here. Brian will be here helping to kick off the Learning Yard. It's going to be awesome.
Always
We'll be getting some emails out to our Learning Yard folks. It's
going to be the best learning.
It's going to be huge. It's going to be huge. The likes of which have never been seen, Brian. It's going to be huge. Everyone's going to tell us how huge it is. There it is. It's going to be great. Learning Yard season kickoff. It's going to be so much fun.
Yeah.
So check that out. Shops open 10 to 5. We've got nukes and packages available on our website. The Queen list, I know folks are, the Queen list is still closed. You've got to get grandfathered into that for right now until we get past all of those orders. Then we'll open it up to the public, and we hope that we can do more of that this year. This year, I'm finally going to make the time to do things for me and for our genetic future. And that might sound silly, but every year we work so hard and dig in to make sure everybody gets queens, everybody gets nukes, that it ends up impacting our growth and us moving forward. So this year, we are intentionally not trying to get buck wild with queens. We're going to set a limited number of queens. We're going to keep it under 2,000, and I'm going to spend time and dig in and spend a lot more time under the microscope, inseminating and working on that art as well, and keep moving our genetic line forward. So I'm really excited about that. I'm really excited about seeing everybody here at the shop, and there are so many great new product lines. You've got to come out to the shop to see. It's going to be awesome. Next week, we're going to be on Brian's channel. Next Wednesday, I've got the honor of speaking at the Summit County Beekeepers Association, and it's on a Wednesday. So next Wednesday, you'll be probably without me. Maybe I can tune in with the Summit County folks for a couple minutes. That might be kind of fun. But next Wednesday, 8 o'clock on Brian's channel, I hear there may be some new news that you guys will be dialing in, allegedly, maybe. Maybe, possibly.
It's going to be huge. The best announcement.
Oh my gosh. Hey, until then, Casey, thanks again for everything that you guys do. You guys are awesome. Thanks for being part of the Stream Team family. We really, really appreciate that. Queen Right Dial just chimed in. Big announcement. Big. Ready to dial it in. Until then, we want to remind you to be the lighthouse and be the change you want to see in this world. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.